Hey everybody, it's Monday and I promise something less controversial. It'll be less controversial on this channel. Overall, this is probably a very controversial statement. I don't care because after all the Game of Thrones kerfuffle, I went back and watched the first, I think I'm on episode 6 now of season 1. And I was trying to see whether it held up as well as I thought it did. Like, was my memory of it kind of rose-colored glasses? And yeah, it was. Season 1 was rough. But I had forgotten. I remembered there were a lot of boobs in season 1. I forgot just how many boobs there were. There are tits everywhere. Sometimes it's one tit, sometimes it's two tits, sometimes it's big tits, sometimes it's small tits, but it's tits, 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 gore, tits, tits, dragon age tits, gore, dragon age tits. Dragon age? Dragon eggs. It's crazy, over the top, boobs, 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 boobs. And somehow this show got branded feminist in some quarters. And it's not even like the artistic tits that you get in Westworld, where the nudity in that opening scene with the fly and all that crap. It's eventually making you realize that, you know, these machines are treated like commodities. They're not given the dignity of regular people, which is why there's less nudity in season 2 that for some odd reason people didn't like. I love Westworld. I'm glued to Westworld. But man, like, there's a scene in, like, I think it's the first episode where it's just the brother, the other crazy Targaryen, just whips off. He's like, you slouch, and he whips off Daenerys's dress and like fondles her boob, and the camera takes this giant close up of her. Well, he's like, what? How is this a feminist show? It's really not. Yet this is considered okay. People felt so betrayed by the ending because, you know, Daenerys didn't end up with all the things. She was never going to. Her speech at the end about fear is identical to a speech that Robert Baratheon gives in the first season, the first few episodes. This idea that the show was these conversations in dark rooms, it really was the minority, at least in the early going. It become that as it matures, but right now, boobs, and then, you know, decapitating a horse, Tyrion Lannister smashing someone's face in with a shield, just blood, 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 boobs, boobs, blood, blood, boobs, boobs, blood, boobs, blood, boobs. That is Game of Thrones, the first half of season 1. And it made me think, like, why did many of the same people who fall in love with these characters, especially the female characters, who have their boobs out way more often than is necessary to the plot, why is that okay? But the skimpy costumes with no actual nudity, it's implied nudity, so there's no nipple. There's, you know, maybe there's some thong butts, but there's no exposed breast anywhere in Mortal Kombat. Why is that considered bad, bad, very bad? We have to get rid of that because of female sensibilities. But Game of Thrones, all those ass, titties, titties, ass, titties, titties, that's okay. And yeah, I'm overusing this language because it's in your face. And in many of the actors' faces in some scenes. And so it really made me think, why? Why the double standard? You guys know I'm obsessed with apparent double standards. And again, this is not an apples to apples comparison. It is the size of the discrepancy in reactions that has me curious. And it's three things, I think. First of all, Game of Thrones, even though premium cable is still a primarily male audience, services like HBO have a really hard time attracting women. That's why they put on horrible shows like Girls, which was still ass, titties, titties, just a different kind of titties, titties. But it's primarily men, white men, who buy premium cable packages, just the conventional wisdom, and I'm not saying this is true, I'm just saying the conventional wisdom among these media companies is that men are the ones that are going to spend way too much money on something not necessary like television. So men are the primary demographic. Oh, speaking of money, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. This video is almost guaranteed to get demonetized because of the subject matter. But there is this perception that Game of Thrones is somehow for women too, right from the get-go. No, it's not. 1990s fantasy? No freaking way. Literary fantasy? Fantasy is still considered a male-dominated literary genre. It's, outside of young adult, it's very, very hard to get books published without... I know female authors who use male-sounding pen names so that their books will sell better in the fantasy sci-fi genre. It's still like that. So, but I think the perception is that, oh no, this is for us too. We feel represented. The other is the marketing. They did represent these women as relatable, as people we can understand, as vulnerable, unlike the warrior women in Mortal Kombat. But I think the biggest reason why it's treated with a double standard is much more visceral. Nudity is used in Game of Thrones to show the mistreatment of women. It is not depicted as a woman consciously choosing to dress in a provocative way by choice. I think that's why everybody freaked out at the Arya. I keep pronouncing her name wrong. It's like Arya, like Arya instead of Arya. Arya is how they pronounce it. Stark. Her nude scene in the last season, everybody flipped out because it was consensual, because she did it by choice. Everybody freaked out. Where the ass, titties in the first season, it was all whipping off Daenerys' dress to show the goods. I think that unfortunately is the problem, which is another sign, and I talk about this a lot, of the insidious sexism that goes on within feminist circles. Many self-described feminists are still not comfortable with women consciously and consensually flaunting their bodies. And I think that's what puts off the people regarding Mortal Kombat. And this seems completely ass backwards to me, because if you go to any physical realm, be it bodybuilding, figure modeling, UFC, any sort of professional sport, beach volleyball, anything like that, the women aren't wearing much. Part of it is because of heat. Part of it is because of freedom of movement. Part of it is to cut down on wind resistance, because if you've got anything loose and it flaps, it slows you down a tiny, tiny bit, but milliseconds matter in these sports. And of course, in things like UFC, the more you have to grab on you, it's a tactical advantage for any opponent. I mean, things that use gis, like judo, karate, things like that, they do pull. That's why female police officers don't have long hair. They don't have ponytails. It's all got to be back in a bun so that nobody can grab it and yank it. So the truth is that, yes, the long flowing hair and things like that in Mortal Kombat is not as realistic, but it is a more positive. It's certainly more sex positive. I think it's in general more feminine positive, the way these warrior women are depicted as confident and aggressive in Mortal Kombat. I actually think that's much more positive, and I think that's why it's getting such a bad reaction, because a lot of people still are not comfortable, even so-called feminists are not comfortable with women being aggressive, being bloodthirsty, being proud of their bodies, even vain. These are considered unfeminine characteristics, and even feminist circles still have problems with them because feminism is still imperfect. People are coming at it from, their own boxes, their own misconceptions. And unfortunately, a lot of these things that have been done allegedly to benefit women were short-term gains, but long-term it's going to be a lot harder to actually get true equality. And the emphasis on the pay gap, I think, is or the wage gap is I think it might be a bit of a red herring. It's an interesting tool to measure, but the reality is that we really need to focus on the characteristics that are considered desirable and acceptable in women, because that, first of all, determines career choice. Secondly, determines how successful a woman is going to be when vying for leadership. And then how women are treated in the public space. I mean, I'm thinking of times that like Bill Clinton or Tony Blair teared up just a little while they were speaking, and everybody's like, oh, they're so dreamy. It actually helped their image, even though they were humans of questionable morality. But Theresa May tears up in saying, serving as prime minister was the honor of her life. And people go crazy. It becomes why did her leadership end in tears? And a big deal was made about it. There used to be a truism in politics that Bill could cry, but Hillary couldn't. And this is a real problem in female leadership, because tears are something that both men and women expel. There's stories about how Jason Momoa cried more during those really, really violent sex scenes between Drogo and Daenerys than Emilia Clarke did. And that's okay. That makes him seem like a sensitive guy. But, Emilia Clarke was afraid to let anybody know that she was recovering from a brain aneurysm, because she was afraid they'd see her as weak and unable to do the job and fire her. There's still this huge double standard. There's this huge assumption of feminine weakness that is a problem whenever women step into leadership roles. You have to show you're so much tougher than men just to be treated equally, because of this perception that women can't hack it, women can't be seen as leaders. And that is feeding into this idea that somehow the nudity of victimization, the boobs of victimhood in Game of Thrones is somehow more acceptable than the skimpy costumes in Mortal Kombat. I mean, there was a scene in that first episode of Game of Thrones where she is wearing just like a sheer dress. You can see her nipples through it. And they don't explain why she's wearing a sheer dress. It's just a ceremony. It's so Khal Drogo can come over, look her over, sum her up, and decide if she's acceptable to him. They don't explain it. They just, the ceremony's complete. I had to look that up because I'm like, what is going on here? It's so brief. Pacing problems existed season 1 forward. That was one of the things I determined. But yeah, then you get into Mortal Kombat, and those women are just, they're from other planets. They're from other cultures. They're not, the Edenians are not like Earthrealm women. They aren't. The Netherrealm women are not like Earthrealm women. They have different customs. They have different manners of dress. Women from different cultures around the world have different manners of dress. In African countries, they wear less in a lot of places because it's hot. And this idea that no self-respecting woman would choose to dress provocatively, that whole big thing about Jennifer Lawrence wearing this really nice dress on a red carpet when all the guys were like wearing coats. She did that by choice. Nobody forced her to do it. She wanted to. She loves her fashion, and that's the way she chose to dress. Maybe she was a little chilly, but that's her choice. A lot of people could not believe that she made that choice by choice. And that is crap. That is absolute bullshit. Nobody thinks a man is diminished when they're wearing less. Men are allowed to use their bodies, even if they're not flawless for comedy. I mean, look at Fat Thor from Avengers Endgame. Big tummy being shown. He was shirtless, big beer gut. That's considered funny, or somehow, oh, it's all male power no matter what. A woman, when she is naked, is seen as demeaned unless you jump through all these hoops to show otherwise, and even then, some people still think it's demeaning. It is a complete double standard. And until we start looking at and addressing those double standards, things like career choice, things like leadership, things like, certain female-dominant jobs being seen as financially as valuable as certain male-dominated jobs, all these things are going to elude us in terms of equality until we address the basic assumptions we have about the masculine and the feminine. Whereas the masculine is inherently strong and predatory, and the feminine is inherently weak and victimized. And the number of stories about these strong women overcoming victimhood, only not really, because, like The Handmaid's Tale, she just keeps getting knocked back right where she started every freaking season. Hopefully this season will be better. But it's this idea that all women have to do is endure to be strong. They don't have to surmount their challenges, and people expect them to win, even though, what does victory mean? Implausibility, stuff that no one can replicate in the real world. The interesting thing is that even though Daenerys started in a really crappy place, she ended in the exact same place the last 5 rulers of Westeros did. They all got killed by someone close to them. That's more equal than where she started. That is how rulers end up, and everybody was disappointed. That's weird. I thought that was kind of poignant and an explanation of why this cycle of fighting for this Iron Throne, which was apparently forged by a dragon, which I guess is why a dragon had to destroy it. But, the thing that was disappointing about that is not that Daenerys had to die, but that they didn't really change the structure all that much. But still, her ending was much more like anybody in her role in that world before her, whether they were male, whether they were female, no matter what house they came from. The Baratheons, the Lannisters, the previous Targaryens, they all went out that way. That's equality, when everybody's treated equally. The problem is that people got so invested in her victimhood and her apparent ascension out of victimhood. That's why I don't like the changes they made. Because if a woman's only allowed to be naked to show vulnerability or to show weakness or to show victimhood, what message does that send women about our bodies? Nothing good. Okay, I'm going to wrap there. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.